Shalom and welcome to NeshamaCast, exploring Jewish spiritual care today, brought to you by Neshama, Association of Jewish Chaplains. I'm your host, Rabbi Ed Bernstein. Opinions expressed by our guest in this edition of NeshamaCast or by guests in any edition of NeshamaCast are the opinions of the guest alone and do not reflect the position of NAJC.
Good evening and welcome to NeshamaCast Live. Thank you, Freda, for that beautiful introduction. It's wonderful to be able to welcome so many NAJC colleagues to my home turf here in Palm Beach County, Florida. I'm sorry for those who got rained on today, but we're enjoying our time together at this conference of NAJC at the West Palm Beach Marriott. Couple of housekeeping notes about NeshamaCast in general. NeshamaCast has had a great season 3. Our milestone achievement this year was our upgrade to professional production. I'm grateful to our producer, Steve Lubetkin, for taking our production quality to a higher level. Steve, of course, is the producer of Jewish Sacred Aging's Seeker of Meaning program, and I'm grateful to Richard for making the shidduch, the match between NeshamaCast and Lubetkin Media Companies. I'm pleased to share that the recording of tonight's program will stream on the feeds of Seekers of Meaning and NeshamaCast. I want to thank Richard and Steve for their partnership in the production of tonight's program. Oh, you can applaud for them. Now for some brief commercials. The production upgrade of NeshamaCast Season 3 was made possible by a generous gift by anonymous donors to whom I'm grateful for their vision and trust in the NeshamaCast project. Looking ahead to Season 4, we will need additional funding to maintain the high caliber of our production. If you know of potential donors who would like to sponsor one episode, five episodes, or a full season of 10 episodes, please let me know. In addition, if you work for an institution like a hospital or a nursing facility or a federation agency that would be interested in sponsoring an episode, please let me know as well. We already have a great lineup of colleagues for the next season. Please work with me to secure the funding for NeshamaCast Season 4. And one more housekeeping note, and that is for the NAJC members in this room. Many of you are part of or have taken part in the social media committee, which produces NeshamaCast. And if you would like to get involved in the production of NeshamaCast, please speak to me during the conference. We'd love to have more NAJC members involved. So that's the end of commercial. It's a high honor and privilege for me to share the stage tonight with Rabbi Richard Address. Richard, you have been a role model for me, not only as a rabbi and chaplain, but as someone who has expanded your rabbinate beyond the four walls, the Dalet Amot, as we say, of any particular building that you happen to work in. You have cultivated the use of mass media to touch the lives of tens of thousands of people throughout the world. A little later, I hope you and I can talk about the role of mass media in expanding the role of the rabbi and chaplain. But first, I want to dive into an important current issue that I know is of deep interest to you, medical aid in dying. You've lectured about it and also discussed it with guests on the Seekers of Meaning podcast. Richard, from a 30,000 feet perspective, what is medical aid in dying?
Okay, so we have about 4 or 5 hours? Okay, hi everybody. It's nice to see so many people I haven't seen in a couple of months or more. First of all, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and it's nice to be back in Florida, actually, as I live in southern New Jersey. So the garden spot of America. Medical aid in dying is now legal in about a dozen states in the United States of America. I live in New Jersey. It's been legal in New Jersey since August 2019. Despite attempts to the Supreme Court of New Jersey to overturn it, it failed. The law in New Jersey is based upon a law in Oregon, which is now 20-something years old. And for those of you who live in New York, I found out that the New York governor just signed the bill that will become law in August 9th, I think is the date that it will become law after a couple of issues get settled. Basically, medical aid in dying is for someone within the 6-month period after several adjudications by medical professionals, mental health professionals, who usually in terms of excruciating pain and suffering, have decided that the arsenal of medical technology has been exhausted. It is now, I know what's happening. I will make the decision to seek a consultation with a physician who will write me a prescription only after all these hoops have been jumped through, a lot of hoops. And at an appointed time that of my choosing with my family, I will take this medication and I will go to sleep. I will die. In the media, depending on where you live, it's sometimes called physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. But it's the physician, according to it, cannot administer. The person has to self-administer. In the cases I've been involved with, as I should tell you in full disclosure, I lobbied for the bill in New Jersey. It's been in the hopper in the state for about over a decade. It never made it out, but it finally did. It was lobbied against by significant members of the Orthodox community in New Jersey and the Council of Bishops. It went through an appeal, which lost. I do work in a consultation basis with Dr. Robin Plumer, who is one of the 2 doctors in New Jersey who will work with a family. And my role with her is very simple. I talked to her and she did a podcast for me about 2 years ago on why she chose to do this. You can get these podcasts on the website, jewishsacredaging.com, and you just type your name in the search thing and it comes up. It's a very technical explanation, I know. I spoke to her and said, if there's a Jewish family, unaffiliated, who would like to talk to a rabbi just to talk about this thing, I would be willing to volunteer to do that. So in the last 2 years, I've been involved with 3 families. One family, the first family, was a family that I'm still very close with, a member of my former congregation. The wife was dying of cancer. They exhausted everything. She knew everything, met with the family, long time conversations with the family, went through all the goose. Carol chose to administer the medication by herself on December the 14th of last year. I went to the funeral. The family wound up coming up to me and thanking me for connecting them with Dr. Plumer. And there are 2 other families that I've worked with, both in similar situations. The issue of pain and suffering, a lot of counseling, a lot of conversation with the family. In all 3 cases, the families were 100% in favor. They walked through all of this. You have to remember, this is not something I decide to do tomorrow. There are long periods of hoops. And as many of you, and I know many of my colleagues have been involved with, I also remember Bill and Andy. He was also dying of cancer. This was before the thing became legal. They had accumulated medication, never used it, but it was just like in the drawer just in case, almost like a safety valve. One of the things is where I've taught this, and David Balto's here. He did the Healy conference in January, did a whole program with Jason Reeder, myself, and Elliot Dorff on this, which was very good. What it is pointed out that we still do, despite all the technology, and Dr. Kogan was talking about some of this afternoon. We do a horrible job in our congregations of teaching this, of explaining to lay people, I know people in our families, the Jewish approaches to death and dying, the dignity. Dale does this, and brilliantly teaching people, this is what our tradition says. This is some of the midrash. This is some of the nuances. We do a horrible job about that.
Why is that?
Well, I don't know, my honest opinion. Of course you do. It was a silly question. I think we're scared. Death scares out of us. Look,
We don't want to put an E on our podcast.
no, please don't, because Lubetkin would edit it out. We're very afraid. Look, here's the Ritchie address theory. You feel free to disagree with this. I believe this 1,000,000% is part of what I call my theology of relationships. And I struggle with this continually. That very simple form is that as we get older, it's very much part of our Jewish sacred aging work. The power of personal human relationships become more important than anything else. Because we don't want to be Genesis 2:18. We don't want to be libado, alone. Not alone, I'm done with everything. I just need a night by myself with the clicker. But existentially aloneness. The book that I always recommend to my colleagues is Irving Yalom's book, Staring at the Sun. You haven't read it, it's great for my colleagues. It's a high holiday book. Not that anybody's worried about the high highs. We only have 4 months to go.
It's early this year.
Oh, yeah, it's early every year. The older we get, it gets earlier and it gets late early. But it's about it's about this existential challenge to us, especially as we get older, that we don't want to be alone. And look, why was religion created? Religion was created because it comes to the realization that we're all going to die. And we don't want to. So we created mythologies and gods and myths. This is why Judaism is so great. It's so powerful. We don't hold on. We want to taste all of the life. Chaplain, I mean, you've been in hospital rooms where the people are dying, but they want to hold on. That one of the tensions that we talk about a lot in Jewish sacred aging, and I know I'm jumping ahead, is the tension of holding on and letting go. Actually, I think it's part of this Torah portion, because Moses has to figure out how he has to let go of some leadership thing. But as we get older, this tension of what do we need to hold on to keep ourselves healthy, mentally and physically, and what at this stage of my life do I need to let go? I don't need the shtuyot anymore. That's a technical Salida term.
Nonsense.
No, I just don't need to. Sometimes it's relationships. Sometimes it's, who knows?
Richard, what was it that, of all the issues out there and all the issues that pertain to an aging population, what was it that got you in the kishkas about medical aid and dying that led you to advocate for it?
I think it came from all my rabbinic work in congregations, because in addition to working for the union, I was about 25 years worth of congregational experience. And just seeing people in the trenches, with the issue of pain and suffering. One of the first bioethics works I started getting involved with is actually one of the truth. In my pulpit work in Los Angeles in the 70s was a big conference in Northern California. The first article I ever wrote that was published was called Testu Torah, like in 1975 of the CCAR journal. But it was a result of the geneticists meeting in Northern California Conference Center saying, much like they're doing at AI now, what Claudia was talking about today, and saying, hey, we just unlocked the genetic code of the human beings. Whoa, we don't know what to do with this. There's got to be some regulations. There's got to be some. I said, wow, how does this begin to affect the ethics of Judaism? One thing led to another. I spare the story. But then you started to talk to people at the end of their life who are contemplating their own finity, contemplating their own mortality. And you factor in the pain and suffering that goes through. If you read through a lot of the response of both the Orthodox, conservative, Reform response, that pain and suffering issue comes up all the time. It's one of the loopholes, even in the Orthodox community, that in the winter of 2021, there was an issue of Tradition magazine that talked about this. And even in 1993, there was an article by, I think, Rosner and Tendler in Tradition that talked about now we have to consider quality of life. And the reason for that is the impact of medical technology has pushed the envelope. And all of you who work at hospitals and hospices, you see this every single day. So do my pulpit colleagues. That started to get me interested with the legality of this. I began to do some more research. One thing led to another. And when I moved to New Jersey, it became a hot topic in New Jersey. And then you started to see talk to people in our congregations who were dealing with this. And they would look at you and say, what do I do? I know the end. I know what's happening. And this goes to something that's a theological question, not puppet. It's worthy of a conference. All of you have seen this. All of you walk through this. It's one of the wild cards that I use and that's the role of personal autonomy. And in that theological question, does this body belong to me? Or does it belong to God? And so if you read the tradition and the stuff that when Jason Weiner did a couple of podcasts for me on his books, and in his books, and I know that, as you guys know, my body belongs to God, but in other perceptions and the liberal Jewish tradition, no, my body belongs to me.
Yeah. So I want to dig a little deeper into the autonomy issue. So from the more traditionalist segments of the Jewish community, as you already indicated, as well as the Catholic community, there's been resistance to medical aid in dying. There's an organization called Amecha,
right,
which is an Orthodox organization that helps members of the Jewish community navigate aging and end-of-life issues. Or they've lobbied against the MAID laws that were recently passed. NAJC and Amecha, by the way, have partnered on various educational initiatives, though NAJC does not have an official position on the MAID laws. Still, many of our colleagues here in NAJC are coming from a religious framework that regards the act of hastening of death to be strictly prohibited under Jewish law, because the body is not ours ultimately. The body belongs to God. So given your understanding of Jewish tradition, your understanding of autonomy, how can medical aid in dying be justified as a normative practice within the Jewish community?
I don't know whether it's going to be a normative practice, because if you look at the Reform responsa and the Conservative responsa that were written in their multi-page, the Dorf's responsa from the Conservative was like 48 pages. And I urge you to read, if you can, it's great. And also the responsa given to the Reform movement. They basically say, we don't like this. There may be circumstances. And even in that,
like extreme pain or uncontrollable pain.
Look, all of you are familiar with the response from the various traditions about the principle of double effect.
Spell that out for us.
Okay. And they have to take a lunch break. Oh, there's cookies out there. Right. Because it's Jewish. We have to eat. I'll refer to a response called Relieving the Pain of a Dying Patient. That's a Freehop response, I think. If a person is dying, their ghost says the end of life, if I give an increased amount of painkiller to relieve the excruciating pain and suffering, that may bring closer the death that was happening anyway. If my intent, and Dorf in his response in his talk in his section D, which he goes through 8 or 9 or 10 conditions. This is one of them. If my intent is say, look, the person's dying anyway, let's do this. Obviously, that's murder. But if my intention is to alleviate the excruciating pain and suffering, and to allow a person to die in dignity, because that is one of the chief bioethic fundamental ethics of our tradition, the dignity and sanctity of human life and the preservation of life in dignity and in sanctity. And all of you know dignity and sanctity in our technological world is a very subjective thing. Your idea of dignity and sanctity may be radically different than his, depending upon the context. So then that second scenario becomes the mitzvah, because you're relieving the excruciating, the person's dying, his ghost says, the person inside that excruciating pain and suffering. If you go through all the responsa across the denominational lines, the relieving of excruciating pain and suffering, there's no theological value in Judaism for you to suffer. There isn't. So if you can alleviate that, that's a mitzvah. And I could give you the quotes, but you've got this. Anyway, but we can put no. So Jason's book, he talks about the same thing, and he Judaism forbids euthanasia. Physicians assist suicide. Nevertheless, the patients who request it should generally be treated with respect and compassion. Listen, he talks about that, but he also talks about the fact that it is a mitzvah to alleviate pain and suffering. And a gloss on the winter 2021 article entitled Halachic Framework for Decision-Making in Acute Critical Illness. A gloss by Rabbis Chaplain and Wale, quote, Feinstein's response is saying that untreatable suffering can be worse than death. And in that circumstance, life need not be prolonged. Igaret Moshe, et cetera, I have this. Anyway, look. And this is why I believe that Judaism's brilliance is that it is a contextual religious civilization. I'm not a bioethics expert by any stretch of the imagination, but my understanding of halacha is that it says you deal with the case before you. And I think the brilliance of our tradition is it says examine the case because your situation can be radically different than yours. And you have to treat the case before you. My theory of decision-making is value, context, choice. You actually have to apply the value you're talking about to the context. And that by doing that, that will lead you to an appropriate Jewish choice. Anyway.
Thank you.
You want it great.
Yeah. You've talked about, and I listened to your podcast.
Thank you very much.
Loyal listener. And yes, you've talked about the need to create a new vocabulary for caregiving in this time in which we live in an era of rapid change. What are current challenges that require new vocabulary? What are some examples?
So again, this is stuff I'm very happy that you raised this with this group. I have no answers. But I think the Jewish community now, across the denominational lines, has to start grappling with this. Okay, so about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Rabbi Friedman and I had lunch at some place that I can't find anymore. But it was very, very for this, wherever that was. It was in Philly. It was by the Art Museum. Very in place. So Dale, as you know, is the world's leading expert on spirituality, dealing with dimension outside. Dale's in our bio. That's what she's brilliant. So we began to talk about this, the idea that medical technology is somebody with Alzheimer's, and I would bet you my Philly cigarettes, which are right now worthless. It's not funny. Is that really hurts? That if we took an informal Richie address poll here and say, how many of you dealt professionally or personally with Alzheimer's dementia, 90% of you would raise their hand. And as you know, the caregiving component of this can last not weeks, but years, decades. Exactly right. What's the vocabulary that we have? Is a person who's diagnosed at age 60 with early onset Alzheimer's, are they trefa? They're going to die. Are they goseish? No, they're not within 6 months. Do we need to create a different vocabulary? I think we do. I don't know what that is. I think that's the job of, I think chaplains would be a great study thing to really create something like this because you deal with it all the time. Certainly my colleagues.
Not only the vocabulary for the person with dementia, but then there's the spouse who might not be able to have sexual relation.
Well, that raises another, this is a part of what we do, a workshop in Jewish Sacred Age called New Rituals for New Life Stages. It's really a cool workshop. And the last thing we talk about is the reality. And in every congregation or group that I've taught this in the last decade, this has always been in every congregation. That's with the person whose spouse is in the memory care unit and not coming out and hardly doesn't recognize the children. And the well spouse who's 65 years old cares for this person, visits this person, loves this person, but turns around and says, but I'm 65 years old, I'm healthy. We all know what's going on. And they develop a relationship with somebody else. some of you, I will bet, have walked this walk with either in your family or professionally. Every time I've done this workshop, somebody has come up and taught that that's their life. Well, what is this person guilty of adultery? Or do we have to create? I had a student in one of my classes at HEC when I taught the longevity classes at HEC, Phil, who actually researched this for his final paper and used the concept of the aguna, the changed spouse, and reinterpreted that in the sense of, well, because as like you said, this could last a long time. So could we then reinterpret the concept of the aguna to fit in this, to give permission? Is it for everybody? No. But does Judaism in the 21st century have the responsibility to talk to people where they're at who are living this, because the impact of medical technology is different now than it was in the 17th century, or even the early, when I was ordained in the dark ages of 1972, this was before computers, and to have this conversation in our human relations class was, impossible. But this is being lived now. So the concept of reevaluating and reinterpreting classic Jewish tradition and maybe coming up with new terms, I think we need to do that, because I think lay people would appreciate a personal opinion.
I have in my hand here something that I pulled off my shelf before coming here. This is a little pamphlet that you wrote. That the date on it is 2000. Really, Jewish Lights Publishing put out these little pamphlets. I think they're still in print under a different publisher, because Jewish Lights doesn't exist anymore. But there was a period of time where you walk into many synagogues or JCCs and you find these pamphlets of life lights, help for wholeness and healing. And Rabbi Address wrote, "Making Sacred Choices at the End of Life." And along the way, you have created an organization called Jewish Sacred Aging. And you, as I indicated, so I'd like you, Richard, could you share a bit of the origin story of Jewish Sacred Aging and the issues in our society that you sought to address when founding the organization, and in the years since, what has changed? How have you refined your mission of Jewish Sacred Aging?
The mission keeps redefining itself. This emerged out of the work that I did. Actually, I started working for the URJ when it was the UAHC. Some of you remember those days, as a regional director. In the old days, the union had regions. And I was called from the congregation in LA to come back home and direct the Pennsylvania Council and Philadelphia Federation. So it was basically about 60 congregations in 5 states. And when I began around 1980, the director of regions in New York said, could you create for the movement 3 committees, the Committee on Bioethics, the Committee on the Synagogue as a Care and Community, and the Committee on Older Adults. I said, no, what? Fast forward, that morphed into, because we saw what was happening in the Jewish family, the creation of the Department of Jewish Family Concerns. All of this is gone, by the way, the union's restructuring. Some of you know what that means. They got rid of all the regions and they got rid of all the departments. So for about 15 years, all the programs around families, from disabilities, all the LGBTQ stuff, bioethics, care and community, older adults, all ran through a line department. So we would publish a bioethics case every year. And then we started to do the demographic analysis in the late of the last century of our community. And lo and behold, we found that we were aging quicker than the normative American community, and we were under replacement level. Fast forward to 2020, and the Pew study, which did an analysis of the American Jewish community, and right now, this is, you don't have to believe me, you can look it up. Right now, in 2026, over 50% of the entire American Jewish community, including all the denominations, everybody, are over the age of 50. we are an aging community. We are under replacement level. And the institutions, the Jewish institutions, don't want to deal with it. So when I left McCourt in 2014, I decided I would take all the stuff that we were doing in aging, and I had been publishing and doing stuff, into my own little bailiwick to keep me busy, keep me from being bored. Because the idea of retirement was like, What that's happened, Ed, is something very interesting. What we found is that this cohort, which is now a multi-generational cohort of older adults in the Jewish community, have been very, very much responsible for the total restructuring of the American Jewish community in many ways, certainly the spiritual revolution. And they're hungry, and I use that term advisedly, they're hungry to learn about adult Judaism, not the bubblices and the made-up miracle story, but really just what we're talking about now, okay? I'm 81 years old. I'm starting to understand my body is changing. Why? As I told my doctor, it's still a lot of the original equipment. And as my son reminded me, well, you're off warranty. But what do those changes mean? What are the changes with our adult children mean? Because they don't need us like they used to. And what does that do to me? Watching if you're blessed to have grandchildren, watching them grow up, and remember when they're 6 and 7 and 8, they've needed you. Now I have to make an appointment to see my grandchildren who are teenagers. All normal. I just had this conversation with a class that I teach during the week, and a couple of people we were talking about and said, Richie, all I do now is my week is determine how many funerals I go to. When you sit with your friends, in the old days, you talk about sports or this, who's doing that to who. Now they go to what they call an organ recital. Okay? What doctor are you going? I'm going to this doctor. Well, I go to that doctor. Are you on this medication? I have this medication. I'm not making this up.
Yes. And the laughter indicates a lot of familiarity.
What we found is when we give the opportunity to talk to people who are living this from a faith perspective, because we don't do this in synagogues, and teach Torah and text. So for example, the portion for this week, we're talking about not only the El Na Rafana line, healing, which is from this text, but also Moses is having to contemplate, I'm tired of this people, I'm done. Well, go get 70 old people, and they're going to sit down with you, and they're going to, I have to it's hard sometimes for people as we get older, to let go, because when we let go, does our own self-identity become up for grabs. So the podcasts that we do, we do a new one every week. The work has evolved into really trying to teach how we take sacred text and allow them to speak to La'asot, as the blessing goes, to speak to people in our generation who are living through all these changes, and at the back of which is, wow, you're at 81. You know what's coming. And what the hell does it mean? So it's very exciting. I mean, we do a Torah interpretation every week on the website on JewishSacredAging.com just for older adults, because and the longevity stuff, many of us perhaps never expected to live this long. And what the hell does it mean? And the one thing we can control a little bit of our health. I can eat a lot of kale, don't eat the processed turkey. But at the back of our mind, not the back or in the front of our minds, is the one thing I will tell you right now that none of us can control. Well, you could sit in shul 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never eat a cheeseburger. The one thing we cannot control is time. And every single person in this room knows somebody who thought they had more time. So then the spiritual question that we teach all the time is, what do we do with the time we have left, knowing that we cannot control the time we have left? And that, in a nutshell, is to be busy.
So I'm glad you mentioned podcasts, because I want to talk to you about that. So you've been a congregational rabbi, as you've mentioned. You served as a professional leader in the Reform movement, that you are Dre. And for a number of years now, you've had a pulpit, as it were, that extends far beyond any congregation or denominational movement through the reach of your Seekers of Meaning podcast. And to give testimony to that, I want the audience to know my wife, Ariella, is here. And she and I often listen to Seekers of Meaning together. And she is as big a fan as I am.
Way to go.
So
Two is in the mail.
Two questions. And you've kind of addressed this already, but why did you start the Seekers of Meaning podcast specifically as part of your overall mission? And what is it like for you to expand your rabbinate behind the confines of a discrete local community, either a building within walls or a movement which is a certain number of congregations, each one of which has 4 walls? What does it mean to you to have this larger audience that you've cultivated?
Well, first of all, it's fun. Why did you start the show? That's a good rabbinic. How do you? It's my show. How do you feel? Thank you, Sage. Actually, Steve is listening. Our producer, Steve Lubetkin, who's in Cherry-O, and who's a professional podcaster, has written award-winning books, and that's his life. We were talking about 10 years ago about, we had a radio show in Philly, and it was sort of like, took up a tremendous amount of time. He said, why did you move into podcasting? I said, I don't even know what that is. He explained it, and we just started. We just literally said, oh, what the hell, let's try it. And he put it together, and it's grown. And that's literally the truth. It came out of a conversation we had at a diner, which is, high cuisine in South Jersey. And let's try it. It was his idea, really. It was really his idea. So it's expanded, and we keep trying to figure out ways to expand it more, and part of that is at time. At my stage of life, there's probably I don't know how much time it takes to do a weekly podcast. We take one day a month. We record like 4 or 5 back to back. And then Steve does the post and what he'll do with this and makes it look very professional, and then slots them. But that's the truth. It was really conversation that I had with Steve Lubetkin.
Have you found that you've been connected to people you wouldn't otherwise?
Yeah, I'll go someplace and speak, and somebody says, "Oh, I heard this podcast," or the biggest. Look, to be honest with you, the biggest problem is how to publicize it, because I'm doing this by myself, and anyway, that's the biggest. How do you market it? We didn't have a class in marketing at HUC when I was there. They may have one now, but they didn't have it when I was there. Sadly. But was your journey similar to that?
Well, even though I'm a little younger than you, I can tell you that JTS in the 1990s did not offer a class in podcasting or making YouTube videos or Instagram or anything like that. That stuff didn't exist even as late as when I went to rabbinical school. It's stuff I've had to pick up along the way as I found my way through the world and through my rabbinate and through chaplaincy. But as I was getting more involved in NAJC, I was familiar with podcasting as a way to engage a larger audience. There were really, I think, 2 reasons that were influential. One, institutional. I felt it was important for NAJC to have a voice in the larger world. At our we're here at our conference in West Palm Beach. A year ago, we had a conference in Chicago, and we were addressed by George Fitchett, who is one of the great thinkers in professional chaplaincy. He's really cultivated the research and the literature for why there needs to be professional chaplains, and particularly in healthcare institutions. And I remember he started his address last year. He's like, what drives him in his work are three questions. What do chaplains do? Why do they do it? And what is the impact? And for him, and for the talk that he proceeded to give, he was talking about presenting metrics to hospital administrators, as well as developing the best practices in the field so that we chaplains could be the best chaplains with evidence-based practice and so forth. So that's George Fitchett from sort of the ivory tower, as it were, of chaplaincy. But when I listened to him, and we already had the podcast well underway, it clicked for me that his questions, which he's talking largely to administrators that have to justify hiring chaplains in institutions, but it relates really to everybody. And I think the world needs to know who chaplains are. We should not be the best kept secret. We are doing important work. And so people out in the community, our colleagues who serve in other ways in the Jewish community, other healthcare professionals, lay leaders, people need to know who are chaplains, why we do what we do, and what is the impact. So that was kind of a 30,000-foot reason as an institution that I thought it was a good fit for NHAC. Personally, I've discovered in my experience doing this, it's been a wonderful continuing education program for me. And I must confess, I don't think anyone else in the room has ever had this before. I sometimes suffer from imposter syndrome, and I'm like, even after I became a board certified chaplain, I'm like, do I really know enough to do this stuff? And so shortly after I became board certified, that's kind of when the podcast came about, and I realized that here I have this opportunity to talk to amazing colleagues who are doing such important work, and each one in a different way, and each one has a different Torah, a different set of wisdom. And in addition to educating our audience, which has grown tremendously, thank God, the most important person in the audience is me, and I've benefited greatly.
Do you see the expansion of this into other forms of media for, like there are now colleagues who are on TikTok, and where you, because I think this is the way of the future. I really do. Do you see how it's expanding the NeshamaCast?
I think we need to be, as the Torah says, Ba'asher hu sham, where the people are. People need to know about what we do. Just as Jewish sacred aging exists because we have an aging population and there is a need for this knowledge, there's a need for people to know who chaplains are and why we do what we do. We are a broken society. We are a society where we're at each other's throats through media and all sorts of ways. And we have an opportunity to take something that's very damaged and do what we do best, which is bring healing to the world. And it's using the technology. So I personally am not expert in TikTok. I invite colleagues here or out there listening who are adept at that to come on the NHAC social media committee and help me with that, because we need to meet the next generation where they are.
Well, not only that, but where the healthcare system, the SNAP thing is going to be changed. There are going to be people who are going to be losing a lot of benefits. Some of them are going to wind up in the hospitals that you guys we're going to be visiting them. And when you're going to ask them, why are you here? They say, well, I lost my benefits. I didn't have enough to eat. The food pantry, we're facing this in South Jersey and all over the country. So the role, I think the role of the chaplaincy is at a point where you can choose to really expand your impact, because what we call in my work, the economics of aging, are impacting more and more and more people. The economic gap between those who can afford and those who can't. I'll give you a perfect example. In 60 Minutes, which is about to die, evidently, they had this thing last night about freezing eggs and in vitro fertilization, which is very important in the Jewish community because our levels of infertility are very, very, very high because we delay getting married, we delay having children. But the reporters did bring up that this is a very economically nuanced for congregants at Colony, okay, a upper middle class suburb of Philadelphia. Many of them I know, they're doing that. But for the people in Camden or perhaps Audubon, New Jersey, who aren't, they can't afford to do this. So there's all kinds of mob, and this is really rooted in Jewish tradition and in all of our text. This is serious stuff, and I think chaplains have a real role because you do say and are underappreciated. And the majority of Amecha, the majority of the people in congregation land, I don't think they really appreciate or know, which is why in the NeshamaCast, I think we can expand the. I ain't tell you what to do, but
I'll talk to your producer.
No. But Steve has but there is a need here because we are really at a very, very crucial tipping point, I think, and especially for older adults too, because all of us are one medical crisis away from financial hardship.
Yeah,
all it takes is one, and some of you probably know people who had that one or living it now. And their life is totally changed. And like the caregiving thing, like the caregiver.
Richard, as we arc towards a conclusion, one of the features of NeshamaCast that I'm proudest of is that on most episodes, towards the end, our guests share a bit of Torah or wisdom from the Jewish tradition that guides them or grounds them in the work of Jewish spiritual care. As you reflect on your work, what is a bit of Torah that's speaking to you now that you can share with our live and online audience?
I'll give you the thing that comes to mind of always, and somebody asked me that, is I go back to my favorite passage in Pirkei Avot, in a place where no one acts like a human being. Ishtadel b'hiyot. Strive to be a human being. Or as we end each podcast with, just be kind to one another. We are in such a kindness deficit, a chesed deficit in this country. Be kind and strive to be a human being. So thank you very much.
You didn't ask me about my Torah.
As the host and as the creator of the NeshamaCast, would you do us the honor of closing by sharing a piece of Torah with us?
I would be honored to. So I think I will also turn to Pirkei Avot. So we recently completed the 7 weeks from Pesach to Shavuot, and it's customary to turn to Pirkei Avot. And one piece this year jumped out at me. Shimon ben Gamliel has a number of things to say, but one thing hit me in a different way this year, and he says, Lo midrash hu ha'ikar ela ha'ma'aseh. This is commonly translated, and it's properly understood as it's not study that's most important, but practical actions, doing mitzvot in the world to make the world a better place. That's what's important. Of course, there's a debate in the Talmud, but don't you have to study too? Study the mitzvot, which comes first. But I looked at this passage. It hit me in a different way this year, and perhaps because I was thinking of preparing for today. But lo hamidrash hu ha'ikar could mean it's not just the study and the theory that is important. You can read books about, say, chaplaincy or healthcare, but the ikar, the essence, is going out and doing it and listening to people's stories and telling the stories that need to be told. And what me and my colleagues together with the NeshamaCast project have been doing is not sitting in the ivory tower, but getting out there and sharing our ma'aseh, our story with the wider world. So my hope is that we will continue to build on that and share our stories. So one last thing, Richard, where can listeners learn more about your work and Jewish sacred aging?
Thank you for asking that. The website is jewishsacredaging.com. That's jewishsacredaging.com. I have some cards if you really want to, conveniently located in my pocket. The weekly podcast is called Seekers of Meaning. We post a new one every Friday. The one that posted last Friday is with a woman in charge, one of the chief officers of Hadassah. The one from last week is with Sean Zevit and his brand new book, which I really recommend. It's a very, very interesting book about money and how he takes Jewish texts. And for those of you who like to write for the website, we have tons of people writing for the website. Just let me know.
Rabbi Richard Address, thank you for participating in the NeshamaCast Live. May you be blessed with health and safety and fulfillment in all of your endeavors.
And mazel tov to you for tomorrow night, for your your birthday.
Thank you to Chaplain Russell Brayman for his tech support tonight. Additional support was provided by my wife, Ariella Reback, who is with us tonight. Thank you, Ariella. Thank you to our conference chair and past NeshamaCast guest, Chaplain Hagar Ben Eliezer, for creating space for tonight's program and for all of her support. Thank you to Allison Atterbury and Gabe Snyman for all of their incredible work that they do for NAJC and this conference. As you both prepare for your next professional chapters, I wish you both much success. Thank you to Rabbi Freda Cohen for her lovely introduction of tonight's program. You can find her terrific episode, Beyond the Bedside, focusing on head chaplains at hospitals, in our NeshamaCast feed. Our amazing theme music is a Niggun for Ki'anu Amecha, written and performed by our NAJC colleague Reb-Cantor Lisa Levine. Finally, the beautiful NeshamaCast poster displayed outside was designed by my daughter, Esther Bernstein. May we all work together to heal our world.